Hello, and welcome to another episode of Perfecting Podcasts. I am Adam Stark, co-host, creator, editor, and other stuff of Pitch This Podcast, a comedy podcast. If you haven't heard of it, we do some fun stuff. We take your favorite show, film, video games as well, and we turn it into we put a new twist on it. We write an original script on every episode for something that you love and make it questionably better, but mostly just have fun, teach you some fun facts about those things, and play games. So it's a fun time. But welcome to another episode of Perfecting Podcasts. My name is Adam Stark, if you did not catch it at the very beginning, and we are here to do another little talk about podcasting, creating a podcast, what it takes to maintain a podcast, all the fun stuff about it. And today we're going to focus a lot today on the networking aspect, because something you might not think about when you kind of get into making a podcast is how to grow the podcast. And a huge aspect of that is networking. It's finding other people, whether it is people who have a podcast or people who have other platforms, meeting those people, learning from those people, and hopefully collaborating and creating something special from those relationships you build with other people. Now, it's not just going to be me talking today. I'm joined today by my friend Leo from Films and Fermentation. So, Leo, come on in. Introduce yourself. Welcome to the show.
How you doing, Adam? How's it going?
Hey, thank you for working with me on finding a time. I'm happy to say I don't have food poisoning this week, so we are actually happening this time.
Yep. To give you some information about my show, my name's Leo. I am the creator, editor, and co-host of Films and Fermentation. I host it alongside my two friends, Mike and Kevin. We are a film and alcohol podcast. We talk about movies, review films, review different topics about movies, and review alcoholic beverages as well. And we try to theme our drinks to whatever it is we're talking about that week.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Now, yes, if you are not caught up with Films and Fermentation, they just had their season 6 finale, which amazing, way to go, well done. Episode 117, so over 100 episodes of this show, which is fantastic. Now, tell me, Leo, when did you guys start? How did you get into wanting to make this podcast?
I had started listening to podcasts a few years back, and mostly movie podcasts and comedy podcasts. And I figured, it's something I always wanted to try. And then in December of 2020, I talked to my friends Mike and Kevin. We got together and came up with this idea for our own podcast. And the three of us love movies. We love sampling different beverages. So we said, why don't we put the two of those together? And that's kind of how Films and Fermentation was born. And so we've been at this for a little over 3 years, 6 seasons, 100 and some episodes, like you said. And,
Nice.
It's grown a lot. It's changed over the years, because when we first started, we really didn't have much of a format. It was kind of just, very ad-libbed. But as we've gotten a little better at it, a little stronger, we developed an outline that we use now for every show. And I feel like the show's better for it now.
Yeah, and that's something we've touched on as well in the past episodes with some other past guests, is talking about how your show grows over time. The first episode, first 10 episodes, first season even is, you don't know what to expect, and you don't know where it's going to go from there. But you typically, if you're paying attention and you want the show to succeed, then you do see growth and you do see change. That's almost always inevitable with any show. Now, tell me, what can you expect in a typical episode? Since you guys do seem to have like a bit of a formula kind of for every episode now.
So our typical episode starts with our usual introduction. We have our little tagline that we throw out at the beginning of every show, that we're just three friends who like to talk shit about movies while getting shit-faced. Then we go into whatever the theme of the show is. We talk about the drinks that we're having that evening. Once in a while, we'll have some notes from the previous show, depending on if we, forgot to talk about something or something came up in the meantime. Then we go to our first segment, which is Mike's segment, which is This Week in Film History, where he brings us a few little facts about movies that happen during the week that we're recording. Then we do our synopsis, which is the recording program we use is called Glip, which is run by Ring Central, and it gives us a synopsis of our previous show after we're done recording. And the synopsis is usually pretty off the wall, almost always inaccurate. The things that it focuses on are pretty hilarious. So we'll do a synopsis according to Glip at the beginning of every show because it's a synopsis of the previous week's show. Mm-hmm. And we try to decipher what it is the Glip recording program thought we were talking about. Yeah. Then we do. Usually, we throw some messages in from some other podcasters that we do, promo swaps with. Mm-hmm. And then we go into our main segment, and our main segment is whatever the theme is of that night. So our previous episode, the season 6 finale, was we were looking at the Rotten Tomatoes list of the top 27 Pixar films and comparing it to our own top 10 list of our favorite Pixar films. And that was our season finale.
Nice. That's great. So what would be your favorite I guess, because I know it's not always the case you said, but I know you typically try to pair a specific drink with the subject matter. So what has been your favorite pairing so far?
I don't know, man. It's so much alcohol we've had over 117 shows.
Depending on how strong it was, you probably can't remember.
Yeah, well, I said there's one that I've had a couple times on the show, and I drink it because it's a funny name, and it's a lot of alcohol. It's called the Adios Motherfucker.
Oh.
And it's vodka, rum, gin, tequila. It's like all the clear liquors.
Yeah.
Plus blue curacao and then a little bit of Sprite for color. And that's a pretty good one. I'm more of like the mixed drink person on the show. I tend to have a lot of mixed beverages because I try to find things that theme with whatever we're talking about if I can.
Right.
Kevin tends to be the beer drinker on the show. He's a big brewery guy, so he likes to try different breweries and bring his samples on the show. Nice. And Mike tends to go beer or like straight bourbon or moonshine or something on occasions. That's like his go-to.
And I like how you said too, you guys kind of have like certain different things you bring to the table, but it also is some segments that are kind of headed off by a specific person. So, and I can assume that's not necessarily how you started, first season with that kind of stuff. Like, how did you guys kind of find your niche or approach to doing your show?
So when we first started, we had a very, very loose, like barely even an outline. It was like our very first episode, we talked about our favorite films from when we were younger. And it just was like a list of like 30 films that we came up with, and we just talked about them. And it was fun, but it was a little like off the wall. Not much organization, just kind of like bullshitting for an hour. And then our first like 10 episodes or so were kind of like that. And then we decided like we needed to start outlining and scripting and figuring out what we want to talk about, because otherwise the show would just go on because we would just keep talking. Then it was Mike who came up with the idea of discussing the film history facts. He also added a segment called Beer History that he does at the end of the episode. Kevin was the one who said we should probably talk a little bit more about our drinks, since we're supposed to be a movie and drink episode, a podcast. So from there, we started like building the outline, and I kind of run the show for the most part. Try to keep it flowing. I create the outline for every episode, and I share it with the guys, and then they add their contributions to it. So we kind of built this relationship now where we like, they know what to expect from me, I know what to expect from them. As long as we have it organized, it doesn't go too far off the rails.
For sure. Now, we're this episode's really, the focus is networking. I want to give you some time to talk about your show and how you kind of grown from there, because I also think there's a lot to learn from each person's specific experience with making a podcast. Now, I think I think kind of, we kind of talked a lot about the growth and you guys understanding your roles and having that formula or the format. And I think another big step too, which does kind of involve networking in a way, is outreach. So, you have, we know each other primarily through Twitter, but how else do you try to put out your content or advertise your content or have kind of that outreach to your listeners or prospective listeners?
So when we first started, we were on Instagram and Facebook, and that was basically our whole outreach. It wasn't until I joined Twitter that the audience grew a lot more, and I kind of wish I had joined Twitter sooner. When we joined that Good Pods group that you and I met on Twitter, that's also been a big help in terms of growing the audience and networking and getting to know other people and hearing what other people do in their own podcasts, listening to a variety of podcasts that I've discovered through Twitter and through the podcast group. Yeah, like when we first started, it was just Instagram and Facebook, and that was basically just reaching like friends and family. It was a struggle at first to kind of figure out how to grow the audience because, I was new to podcasting. We were still just trying to figure out what the show was at that point. Do you advertise? How do you do this? So
Right.
it took a while for us to kind of figure that out. But I would say like the best thing we did was joining Twitter because that I was able to just kind of search through all these different podcast communities, and then with the advent of Good Pods has really been a big help for us too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if people don't know, if people are people listening to this, whether you're listening to it now or later, the Good Pods app is kind of just like almost like a social media platform, but just for sharing and listening, reviewing podcasts. So it's pretty fantastic. It's a good way to also find new podcasts and join different like communities almost within certain podcasts. I highly recommend it. It definitely is a big help, a big plus, and a good way for people who want to start a podcast to kind of just connect with people there as well. And I think that's also kind of what bridged me over to a lot of these bigger groups within Twitter as well, was actually from Good Pods, kind of like reverse in a way almost.
You listen to the advertisement that they have. They call themselves they're like Goodreads, but for podcasts. Now, I used to be an English teacher, so I used to use Goodreads all the time, and it's a similar platform in that you would read a book and you would recommend it to other people, and then you'd grow your community that way. And that's kind of how Good Pods has helped, because you can recommend your show or recommend other people's shows, or build those curated lists that they started doing recently.
Now, my next question is really kind of, it's kind of for the past and the future. I'm not sure when you guys are going to be kicking off your next season, but I guess we could talk about past ventures, which is, what kind of risks or have you guys taken in terms of trying to network or collaborate, and how has that affect and how it affects your show? Like, we've had people on our show where we needed to really kind of change the format of the show to kind of work with them. And I'm not sure how often you guys have guests on the show, but for me, it's sometimes something it's worth considering because it's a good way of having that synergy. We've had guests on our on Pitch This Podcast, and in return, we ended up going on their podcast. So I'm not sure if that's really anything you guys have tried out or want to try out.
No, we've done that. We've had people on our show. We've been on other shows ourselves. I like having other people on the show because then it kind of adds a little something to the dynamic. And for the most part, the people who have come on our show have been, pretty easy about how we run it. Like, I'll send them a copy of the outline, give them some suggestions, let them know what we're going to be talking about, and like most people just come on and do their thing. So like, our first guest we ever had was a guy named Donald, who has his own podcast called You, Me, and a Movie. I had been on his show myself previously, and then he had come on our show. And we did an episode called Movies That Time Forgot. where each of the four of us picked a film from our youth that we remembered fondly that people don't talk about anymore. And we kind of tried to guess what the movie was that we were talking about before giving the title away. So that went really well. Then we had a gentleman named Wayne, who was a host of a podcast called Recasted 2.0, where they would take a movie that was...
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
At least 20 years old and recast it with modern day actors. And we had him on our show because we were doing our own recasting episodes, so we figured we'd bring on somebody who was a sort of an expert at that. We were guests on the All Hallows Eve podcast, who were members of the Good Pods group, and they, in turn, were guests on our show. And then most recently, the three of us together, were guests on Back to the Blockbuster. We were talking about the 15th anniversary of The Dark Knight.
Nice.
So we've had a lot of, I would say the last 4 of our 6 seasons, the last 4 seasons, have really where we've been doing the having people on or going on other people's show thing, at least once or twice a season.
That's great. And I'm curious too. Before we move on, it's a hard question for people who love movies, but what would be your favorite film?
So, for me, it's a loaded question because I don't look at it like one particular movie. Like, I have favorite movies in different genres.
That's fair. Yeah.
I have. If I had to say like my all-time favorite film, because it's probably the one that I've watched the most, is The Shawshank Redemption. Because I've watched it a million times. But then I also love Star Wars films. I've been a Star Wars fan my whole life. Princess Bride's one of my favorite movies. I can quote that one in my sleep. Ghostbusters. These are all films that I grew up with that mean something to me.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to nail it down to one particular film, but the closest I would say to my favorite film of all time is probably Shawshank because it's the one I've seen the most. But then I also watch a lot of really bad movies too. So if you talk to Kevin and Mike, I watch more movies than of the three of us. I probably watch more movies than the other two, and because I have a morbid curiosity to watch anything that sparks my interest, whether it be good or bad. So, in the same week that I watched Oppenheimer, which was a masterpiece of a film,
yes,
I watched this other B-rated movie that I couldn't even tell you the name of anymore because it was that bad. So,
sometimes it's so bad it's a cult classic, and you have something at the level of The Room. And,
cult classics are one thing. There's cult classics like Big Trouble in Little China or The Room, or most John Carpenter films. I would say are probably cult classics. But then there's other things that are just bad.
Yes, I needed to ask you: have you seen Morbius or not?
I have not seen Morbius.
Oh,
there's some movies I just put a pass on because I know they're not going to be good.
That's the problem. That's where you're talking about just films that are just straight up bad. It's it could have been a cult classic, but you really just don't want to be watching it anymore as it's going on in front of you. But my God, if I could take a second to self-promote, we did a episode on Morbius where I rewrote it as a soap opera, and I had to make my co-hosts and our guests see the film so that we could talk about it and relate to it. I still don't know if it was worth it, but the script was funny. So yes.
Well, that's the last episode of yours. I just listened to it recently. Was Blue's Clues SVU. And I really got a kick out of that one, and that's kind of how I came up with the idea for the one that I pitched to you, the Muppets.
That's so funny.
Which I'm working on that script right now.
All right, we can tease your upcoming appearance then. That's fine with me. Oh my God, that's so funny. Great, that's great. I would love to hear it. And we also did a Tommy Wiseau of The Room, if he directed and starred in Titanic. That was also a script I'm very proud of.
I have a bunch of your episodes queued up that I haven't listened to yet. So I listened to that one and the I can't remember the one I listened to right before that. They kind of blend after a while.
No, that's fair. Totally fair. Yeah, no, I feel bad too because I did all the Star Wars ones early on in our seasons, and that was before we kind of evolved as a show and did like the sound effects for scripts and all
Hmm.
that stuff. So maybe we'll revisit it in some way as well because I
Oh,
have.
I remember the one I listened to recently. It was
Mhm.
Thomas the Tank Engine meets Snowpiercer.
Snowpiercer. Yes,
It's a really good one.
that's a great one by Justin too. Oh man, uh, it's fun. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to make the
I
show. It's fun to
Yeah,
have
I said
fun.
that when you added the special effects and the music and all that, that really like picked things up. I think.
I think so too. I think it's great. And actually, I don't know if you saw this, but we just started. I just adapted another. We did this once, and this is the second time. I adapted a script read because we recorded on Zoom, but it's a strictly audio podcast. So the Zoom is just to have the audio backup and also use the video for social media videos.
Hmm.
But what I did was I took the final cut of the podcast with all this sound effects and stuff, and I adapted it to the Zoom video and like had to edit the Zoom video down and everything to make the video match the audio. And now we have the Tommy Titanic script read as a video on YouTube, which I'm so happy about. And we did it also for Mario Kart / Pimp My Ride. That was we did it one. I did it one a little while back too. So that's another thing. It's talking about growth. We are considering going kind of full video for the podcast, even just so we have kind of that accessibility through YouTube. Because not everyone is listening to podcasts on strictly audio. Sometimes they
Yeah.
want that video aspect. I can really. I was kind of like that. I didn't really listen to podcasts at all, but when certain YouTube channels started doing podcasts, I was not knowing that they could be accessed on audio. I just watched them. This is years ago, but I was watching them on the video. So there's also those different avenues, and that was also kind of like the second half of my other question, which was do you have any goals or plans for next season? I know you guys just kind of finished off the season, but is there any kind of goals or expectations you have for when you guys come back?
Well, before I answer that question, like we started out with just recording as well, like no video.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was our first 2 seasons, maybe season and a half.
Yeah, same.
And then we started recording on Zoom for a little while, and I think it works better for us because we are better when we see each other.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You kind of know like how to react to certain things better. When we were just listening to each other, we were constantly talking over each other.
Yeah.
Now it's like you can kind of, if somebody's talking, you can kind of tell when they're done talking, and you can move
100%.
on. 100%. And then we moved away from Zoom and moved to this Glip program because it was free for at least for a while. It was, and because of the synopsis thing, which we thought was hilarious, and then it was easier to edit. And then we started a YouTube channel in season 3. So our YouTube channel doesn't have as many videos as episodes we have, because I think it was like around episode 35 when we started. But we have every episode from then till now is on YouTube. So yeah, we've reached out in that way as well to kind of have a video aspect, because I know we do get a decent amount of views on the videos. So this season, our 7th season is starting at the end of August 29th, which is a Tuesday. Is going to be the premiere of our 7th season. It's episode 118, and it's called Films the Time Forgot, Part 6, because it's the 6th time we're revisiting the Films the Time Forgot subject. It's our favorite thing to do, and we decided to reserve it for like our season premieres. So all of our season premieres are going to be these Films the Time Forgot episodes. One of the things we're changing in this season is we used to do our releases on Mondays. We're now changing our release date to Tuesday. To give me a little extra time for the editing process, and
that's fair.
I've also read that like Tuesdays are a better day for gaining downloads on your episode for some reason. So
interesting.
I figured I'd give it a shot and see if it helps. See if we get some more downloads that way.
That's good to know.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you know how it works.
Yeah. No,
so it doesn't really do much for us. And season 8 might be back on Mondays again.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, no, I know we're still on our we're on our break from our season finale, and probably will come back early September. We need to plan that as well. But I'm glad you have a plan for that, because those are good things to have too.
We're looking
Yeah.
looking forward to being on your show at some point.
Yeah.
We're looking to do a collaboration with Today We Laugh and Learn podcast as well.
Nice.
We'll be on their show and they're going to be on ours. We're going to do like a exchange of episode exchange.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that's what we got so far, and we have plenty of ideas for upcoming episodes. We've already got our Christmas episode planned, so
Nice.
we're kind of ahead of the game now.
All right, that's nice.
So-
Hey, it's good to get that stuff at least written down somewhere, and when the time comes, you at least have an idea of what you're planning to do. And that's all on top of your actual life that you're putting up with. So
Yep.
it's really the side hustle. That's something I didn't realize till way later. I was like, this I guess is a side hustle, a passion project, of course.
Unless you're like Joe Rogan or some celebrity or something like that, like
Yeah.
this is not something you're doing for a living.
No, nope.
Unfortunately.
No, not on the podcaster's salary, unfortunately.
Mhm. But maybe one day, it becomes a little bit of a supplemental, income.
Yeah, and hey, listen, if that's what it can turn into over time, the thing that you enjoy, you actually, fully enjoy doing, then that's kind of like a dream. It's really like a dream job. So fingers crossed. But what do you think you get the most value out of when it comes to those different forms of networking, collaborating? Like, what do you think is the best way of doing it, and what do you see as like the best outcome of doing that stuff?
I think the best way to do it is just to reach out to other podcasts and just say, hey, I like what you're doing, and just trying to like form some sort of like, camaraderie with other podcasters out there. That's the best way, I think, to network. It's obvious that there are other people out there like us who just did this on a whim and didn't realize it was going to become such an important part of their life at this point.
Yeah.
I love doing this. This is every week I look forward to it. It's like that one thing during the week that I could really, really look forward to.
Yeah.
And it gives me a chance to hang out with my two best friends, like.
Yeah. Hey, that's honestly a great thing too. Like our guests are basically just mostly college friends, and then some other friends we met along the way, and it is a great way to kind of just reconnect and like in a way just hang out and just be stupid. But it's worth it. It's definitely worth it.
And I love having other people on the show. So I mean, I'm always willing to work with somebody who wants to come on, or if they want us to come on their show, I'm always up for that. I like being a ham, so it's not a big deal.
That's great. Now, we're almost at the end of our chat here, but I want to say, what would be kind of like the best piece of advice you can give to someone who is starting out, who wants to, they say they want to make a podcast. What would be the best advice you could give them?
Get some decent equipment, because you want to be able to have people enjoy listening to you, not just from your content standpoint, but from an editing standpoint. It's really hard sometimes to listen to a show when the sound's not great. Like our first season is terrible. I never tell people to start with the first season. They ask me like if they want to start listening to the show, I'll be like, well, start listening to the more recent episodes and then work your way back. Don't go to season 1, because then you're going to be disappointed. So get some good equipment. Have a don't worry about what your show is about, because chances are there's other shows out there similar to yours, but that's okay. And you just do the show. Make sure your show is about something that you're passionate about, because if you're going to be talking about it on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, you want to make sure you're not getting bored of it yourself. Lastly, don't give up. It's not something that's going to happen right away. Like, it took us time to figure out what we were doing, and now we kind of feel like we know where we're at now. So
yeah, and that also speaks towards if you're expecting like a fan base or a kind of like a viewership number, like it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen. It could happen. Take a lot of time, and you just can't be discouraged. You're doing
don't get discouraged. Just the numbers will grow. They'll probably grow slowly, because like I said, we're not all celebrities with our own production crews and advertising.
Yeah, unfortunately, but
maybe I listen to a lot of the podcasts like that too, and it's like I love when they cut to their producer or talk to the person that did the research for the show for them, and I'm like, really? I do all the research myself.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Yeah, and depending what the show's about, it could be a lot of work. And
Yeah. So
even though if you're considered an indie podcast, it's really like it's really good experience for working in production as well.
mhm.
So it's
So yeah, but
nothing to discount.
don't be discouraged. Just keep doing what you're doing and try to enjoy yourself.
I love it. Now, well, Leo, thank you so much
Mm-hmm.
for coming on. Again, thank you for really being a team player with timing and everything. I really appreciate it. I'll give you a quick moment if you want to we'll tail end this with your social handles, anything anything else you want to promote at the end of this right now.
So our season premiere for our season 7 premiere will be episode 118, Films a Time Forgot, and that will be premiering on Tuesday, August 29th. You can find us on Instagram at Films and Fermentation. We're on Facebook. We are on Twitter at Films Ferment is our handle. We have a merchandise store on Teespring if you'd like to buy some of our merch. You can support us on Patreon. If you'd like to find all of our links, though, both social media and podcast related, you can go to linktree.com/films and fermentation. That's films, the word and fermentation all together, and find all of our social media and podcast links.
Fantastic. Well, if you're listening to this, do that. But Leo, thank you so much again. This was another episode of Perfecting Podcast, brought to you by Pitch This Podcast. I'm once again the co-host Adam Stark. Thank you again for listening, taking your time to listen, Leo. You've been fantastic. We'll talk soon, and hopefully we're going to find an actual date to have you and your co-host on. I appreciate it.
We'll go forward to it.
All righty. Have a great night.
See you, Adam.
Bye.
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.